The studio lights burned bright as Lana Rhoades sat across from the host, a well-known liberal commentator whose smug grin never faded. The audience was packed, the cameras rolling, and millions were watching live. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was a setup. The host leaned forward, his voice smooth but laced with condescension. "Lana, don't you think people like you, people with your background, should be the last ones to talk about values?" A hush fell over the crowd. His words were carefully chosen, designed to corner her, to remind everyone of her past. The tension in the room thickened, but Lana didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head, letting the silence stretch, making him and everyone else feel the weight of his own words. The host smirked, thinking he had control. "I mean, let's be honest," he continued, leaning back as if he had already won. "People like you usually regret their past and seek redemption in silence, not by lecturing the rest of us on right and wrong." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. They weren't laughing with her, they were laughing at her. But Lana didn't shrink. Instead, she inhaled slowly, her eyes steady, her expression unreadable. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to put her in a box, to dictate who she could be based on her past. But she had a different plan tonight. She wasn't here to play the victim. She was here to flip the script. A camera zoomed in on her face, capturing every detail, the slight smirk, the sharp glint in her eyes. The audience expected her to get defensive, to stumble over her words. Instead, she leaned forward, locking eyes with the host. "It's funny," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Liberals love preaching about growth and second chances, until someone actually takes one." The air in the room shifted instantly. The host blinked, caught off guard. A few gasps came from the crowd. The balance of power was shifting, and for the first time in the interview, the host looked uneasy. He had expected her to fold under pressure, but instead she had just thrown the first real punch. The host's smirk twitched, but he quickly masked it with a forced chuckle. "Oh, come on, Lana," he said, shaking his head. "This isn't about second chances. It's about credibility. You can't just erase the past and suddenly act like some moral authority." His words were sharp, but there was something else in his tone now. Frustration. He had expected her to crumble, to dodge the question, but she was standing her ground. The audience could feel the shift. Some sat up straighter, sensing that this wasn't going to be the easy takedown they had expected. Lana, however, remained unfazed. She didn't even blink. Instead, she tapped her nails lightly on the table, letting the silence stretch again, making him squirm in his own arrogance. She leaned in slightly, her voice unwavering. "So, just to be clear," she said, "your argument is that my past disqualifies me from having opinions?" The host nodded smugly. "In a way, yes. People associate credibility with experience, with the right kind of background." Lana exhaled a soft laugh and shook her head. "That's rich," she said, her tone sharper now, "coming from someone who's never lived a single consequence of the policies they preach." The audience reacted immediately. Some gasped, others murmured. The host blinked, momentarily thrown off. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had built his brand on putting people like her in their place, but for the first time it was clear. He wasn't in control of this conversation anymore. He recovered quickly, gripping his mug tighter. "That's not what we're talking about," he said, voice firmer now. "We're talking about whether people should take advice from someone with your history." Lana tilted her head, her gaze never leaving his. "You mean like how we take advice from politicians who've never worked a real job? Or from celebrities who pretend to care about the working class while flying private jets to climate change summits?" The room fell silent. The host's face hardened, his confidence flickering. The audience felt it. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a battle, and Lana had just landed a hit that would be replayed on every social media platform within the hour. The host shifted in his seat, gripping his cue cards a little tighter. He was losing ground, and he knew it. But he wasn't about to let a former adult film star outmaneuver him on live television. "All right, let's be real," he said, forcing a smirk. You talk about second chances, but let's not pretend society sees you the same way it sees, let's say, a doctor or a teacher. Actions have consequences, Lana. Your past will always follow you." The audience chuckled nervously, sensing the tension rising. He thought he had cornered her again, but Lana remained calm. If anything, she looked almost amused. She took a slow breath, letting the weight of his words settle in the air before. Striking back, she leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "You're right. Actions do have consequences. So let's talk about yours," she said, her voice controlled but razor sharp. "You sit here on your moral high horse, judging me for my past, but let me ask you this. How many people have you torn down in the name of entertainment? How many lives have you ruined for ratings?" The studio fell dead silent. The host's smug grin faded. This wasn't a scripted debate anymore. This was real. "You talk about credibility," she continued, her tone unwavering. "But what gives you the credibility to decide who deserves respect? Is it the suit, the studio, the teleprompter feeding you questions designed to humiliate people like me?" The host's face tightened, his jaw clenching as he tried to formulate a response. But before he could, Lana delivered the final blow. "The truth is, people like you don't actually care about values or second chances," she said. "You only care about control. You preach about equality, but the moment someone like me steps out of the box you put me in, you try to tear them down. And that's why people are done listening to you." A murmur swept through the audience. Some nodded, some even clapped. The host had spent his career controlling the narrative. But tonight, the narrative had turned against him. His authority was cracking, and everyone could see it. The host's face was rigid now, his carefully constructed confidence slipping away. He opened his mouth to respond, but he hesitated for just a second too long. That hesitation, caught on camera, was all it took for the internet to decide who had won this exchange. The audience wasn't laughing at Lana anymore. In fact, some of them were nodding, murmuring in agreement. She had done something few could. She had flipped the script on mainstream media in real time, and she wasn't done yet. She straightened in her chair, her voice steady but powerful. "You see, the real problem isn't my past," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "The real problem is that I don't fit your narrative. You want women to be victims or silent. I refuse to be either." A slow clap began in the crowd, then another, and another. The host shifted uncomfortably, sensing the energy in the room shifting against him. He glanced at the teleprompter, desperate for an escape, but there was none. This was live. There was no editing, no cutting to commercial. Lana had turned what was supposed to be a humiliating interrogation into a defining moment of her own. The tension in the air was electric. The host leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Well, Lana," he finally muttered, forcing a smile, "I guess you've made your point." She smirked. "No," she said simply. "You just proved it." The internet exploded. Within minutes, clips of her response were flooding social media. "Lana Rhoades destroys mainstream media hypocrisy. Lana shuts down arrogant host." The debate didn't end when the cameras turned off. It was just beginning. Fans rallied behind her, praising her courage. The host faced backlash, accused of trying to shame a woman for refusing to be boxed in by her past. And through it all, Lana remained exactly who she had always been, unapologetic, fearless, and in control of her own story.